At his company's IPO celebration party, my son threw my late wife's pocket watch into the champagne fountain in front of 200 Wall Street investors. "This cheap junk doesn't belong here, Dad," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My 9-year-old granddaughter Sophie stood frozen, watching her father discard her grandmother's final gift like it was garbage. I said nothing, just walked through the crowd of suits and diamond jewelry, reached into the fountain, and pulled out the dripping watch. 3 days later, the patent attorney opened the back case. Her hands started shaking. "Mr. Carter," she whispered, "do you know what your wife hid inside this watch? What Margaret had protected would destroy my son's empire and expose a theft that started the day she died." Hello and welcome to today's story. If you appreciate the content we create, please show your love by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel, and telling us where you're watching from in the comments section. Disclaimer: this story features fictionalized elements crafted to engage and educate. Any resemblance to real people or places is unintentional, but the powerful message about loyalty, legacy, and protecting those we love is undeniably real. I'm William Carter, 67 years old, retired software engineer, widower for 4 years. That night, standing in my son David's downtown San Francisco office, surrounded by people celebrating his tech company's upcoming IPO, I'd never felt more invisible. The party sparkled with success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, catered food from restaurants I couldn't pronounce, champagne flowing like water. David had built Technova from nothing, or so the press releases claimed. Now the company was going public, valued at $300 million. My son wore a custom suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. I'd come to give Sophie her grandmother's pocket watch. Margaret had been specific in those final weeks. "Wait until Sophie turns 9, she'd told me, her voice already weak from the cancer. "Give her the watch at a moment when David needs to remember what really matters. He'll understand then." But David had changed since Margaret died. The man who'd once helped elderly neighbors with their computers now saw everything as a transaction, everyone as either useful or irrelevant. "Dad," David spotted me immediately. His smile was practiced, polished for investors. "What's that?" He nodded at the small wrapped box in my hands. "Your mother's pocket watch. For Sophie. She's 9 today." His jaw tightened. "This really isn't the time. This is a business event." "Grandpa!" Sophie's voice cut through the noise. My granddaughter pushed through the crowd, all dark curls and Margaret's blue eyes. "Is that from Grandma?" Before I could answer, David's wife Ashley appeared. 32 years old, former marketing executive, cold smile. "Sophie, darling, your grandmother's things are very old. You have much nicer jewelry." But Grandma said, "Your grandmother isn't here anymore." Ashley's eyes met mine with something close to contempt. "William, David is about to address our investors. Perhaps you could visit another time." David moved closer. I smelled expensive cologne. "Dad, I need you to leave. Now. Your mother wanted Sophie to have this. Mom's gone." His voice had an edge sharp enough that nearby conversations paused. "Stop living in the past. This is my future happening right now. And you're embarrassing me." Sophie tugged his sleeve. "But Daddy," Grandma said. The watch David glanced at his watching investors. Something hardened in his face. He grabbed the watch from my hands. "This cheap piece of junk doesn't belong here." He walked to the champagne fountain, an ostentatious ice sculpture shaped like the Technova logo, and without hesitation dropped the watch straight into the bubbling liquid. The splash was small. The silence that followed was enormous. Sophie made a sound like a wounded animal. "Daddy, that's Grandma's. You'll survive." David turned back to his guests, CEO smile returning. "Sorry about the interruption, folks. Family drama." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. I didn't shout. Margaret had taught me better. Instead, I walked to the fountain, plunged my hand into the ice-cold champagne, and pulled out the watch. Water dripped onto my jacket sleeve. I wiped it carefully with my handkerchief, the way Margaret would have wanted. Then I looked at my son, 40 years old. I'd taught him to code, paid for MIT, believed in every dream he'd ever had. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost him to greed and ambition. Your mother left Sophie more than you know, I said quietly. You just threw away your daughter's inheritance. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I didn't answer. I knelt beside Sophie, who was crying into Ashley's designer dress. Don't worry, sweetheart. Grandpa's keeping the watch safe, just like Grandma wanted. I walked out. The elevator ride down felt like descending into grief. My apartment in the Sunset District couldn't have been more different from David's office tower. No bay views, no modern furniture, just 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that still had Margaret's coffee mugs in the cabinet. I couldn't bring myself to put them away. I set the watch on our old kitchen table, the one we'd refinished together 30 years ago, and made tea, Earl Grey, the way Margaret taught me. As the water boiled, a memory hit me with brutal clarity. 4 years ago, Margaret in the hospice bed we'd set up in our living room. Her voice paper-thin but determined. William, I need you to promise me something. Give Sophie the pocket watch when she turns 9. If David treasures it, he's remembered what matters. If he throws it away. She'd paused, choosing words carefully. Then you'll know he's lost, and you'll need to protect Sophie from him. Protect her from her own father? This watch holds more than time, my love. It holds the truth about Technova. David will want to destroy that truth to protect his fortune. But Sophie deserves to know what her grandmother sacrificed. She'd passed away 2 days later. 6:47 inches the morning, with me holding her hand and our wedding song playing softly. The kettle whistled. I made my tea but couldn't drink it. My hands were shaking. I opened the watch carefully. The face was simple, elegant. Margaret's father had given it to her when she graduated from Stanford in 1978. But as I held it, something felt wrong. The watch was heavier than I remembered. Not by much, but I'd held this watch hundreds of times over 43 years of marriage. I turned it over in my hands. The back case had intricate engraving, Margaret's initials intertwined with decorative scrollwork. But one section of the engraving looked slightly different. Not obvious, but I'd been an engineer. I understood when something didn't quite match. I found my jeweler's loop, the one I used for hobby electronics, and examined the back more closely. There, hidden in the decorative pattern, a tiny seam. Margaret had spent her final year planning something. Between treatments and doctor's appointments, she'd been meticulous about her affairs, her will, her wishes, provisions for Sophie. What secrets did you hide inside? I whispered to the empty kitchen, to Margaret's coffee mug, to the ghost of her smile in every photograph on the wall. The watch gave no answer. But tomorrow, I'd take it to someone who understood these things. Someone who could tell me if my suspicions were right. And if they were, if Margaret had left something inside this watch besides gears and springs, then David had made a catastrophic mistake tonight. A very expensive mistake. Monday morning fog wrapped Pacific Heights in gray silence as I climbed the hill to Rebecca Chen's office. The brass plate beside the door read Chen and Associates, Patent Law and Intellectual Property. Rebecca had been Margaret's attorney for the startup work my wife had done in the early 2000s. Work David claimed never existed. The bell chimed as I entered. Rebecca looked up from her desk. She was 55, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen every corporate betrayal imaginable. William. She stood. When you called yesterday, you sounded upset. I placed the pocket watch on her polished mahogany desk. David threw this in the trash Saturday night, at his IPO party. Sophie watched him do it. Rebecca's expression hardened. She'd met David twice, and had told me both times that my son had the ethics of a loan shark. Coming from a patent attorney, that was damning. Margaret left this for Sophie, I continued. But I think there's something inside, something hidden. Rebecca pulled out a magnifying glass and examination tools. For several minutes, she studied the watch in silence. Finally, she inserted a thin blade into the seam I'd noticed. There was a soft click. The back case swung open like a trap door, revealing a hidden compartment lined with dark velvet. Inside were 3 items: a micro SD card and a sealed plastic sleeve, a folded letter in Margaret's handwriting, and a small key. Rebecca carefully removed the letter first. Her hands were steady, but I saw her expression change as she read. "William," she said quietly, "did you know Margaret was the co-founder of Technova?" "What?" "According to this letter, Margaret developed the core algorithm that Technova is built on, the pattern recognition engine. She filed the patent in 2004, 2 years before David claimed he invented it." The room tilted. I grabbed the desk. "That's impossible. David created Technova in 2006. The whole company is built on his innovation." Rebecca was already at her computer, typing rapidly. "Patent number 7,392,847. Filed April 2004. Inventor, Margaret Elizabeth Carter. Status, active. The patent covers adaptive pattern recognition in data analysis. That's the exact technology Technova licenses to Fortune 500 companies." She turned the screen toward me. There it was. Margaret's name. Her signature. The patent that should have been worth hundreds of millions. "But David's name is on all the company documents," I said. "As CEO, yes. But according to this," Rebecca held up the letter, "Margaret let David use her technology on one condition. That 50% of any sale, IPO, or major liquidity event would go to a trust for Sophie. She wanted her granddaughter to have opportunities she'd never had." My blood ran cold. "The IPO is valued at $300 million, which means Sophie should receive $150 million. Instead, David has claimed sole ownership of the patent. He's about to become incredibly wealthy while erasing your wife's contribution entirely." Rebecca inserted the micro SD card into her computer. Files appeared. Hundreds of them. Original code from 2003. Margaret's handwritten algorithm notes. Email exchanges between Margaret and David from 2005, where she agreed to let him manage the business side while she handled research. And then, dated September 2007, 6 months after Margaret was diagnosed with cancer, a different email thread. David to Margaret. "Mom, the investors want clean cap table. Your name complicates things. Can we simplify?" Margaret's response, "I need assurances for Sophie's future." David, "I promise she'll be taken care of. Trust me." Margaret, "Put it in writing. Legal agreement." David, "We're family. You don't trust your own son?" Margaret, "Then you won't mind signing papers." The email thread ended there. No signed agreement. No legal protection. Just David's empty promises and Margaret's trust betrayed. Rebecca pulled up another file. "This is the original patent assignment. Margaret transferred rights to Technova Corporation in 2006. But look at the terms. Subject to profit-sharing agreement to be executed within 30 days. That agreement was never filed. David got the patent and gave nothing in return. I couldn't breathe. He stole from his dying mother, and now he's taking the company public, erasing her name from history and denying Sophie the inheritance Margaret worked herself to death to provide." Rebecca carefully removed the key from the watch compartment. "This key. I think I know what it opens." Margaret had a safe deposit box at Wells Fargo on Montgomery Street. Box 4739. I helped her set it up in 2007. What's inside? Original signed documents. Margaret told me she was protecting something important. I think she knew David might try to erase her contribution. I looked at the watch, this small piece of metal and gears that had held Margaret's legacy. My wife had known. In those final months, weak from chemotherapy, she'd seen what David was becoming, and she'd planned for it. Built a trap, left breadcrumbs for someone to follow. She'd chosen me to find them. What do we do? Rebecca's expression was steel. We fight. We prove Margaret's ownership. We protect Sophie's inheritance. And we make sure David understands exactly what he threw away Saturday night. Tuesday morning, I sat across from Daniel Morrison in his private investigation office. The space smelled like coffee and determination. Daniel had worked corporate fraud cases for 20 years. Rebecca had called him the best there is at finding what people try to hide. Your son is hiding a lot, Daniel said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. I've had my team digging for 48 hours. What we found isn't pretty. He opened the folder. The first document was a bank statement. David has been moving money offshore for 8 months. Cayman Islands, Singapore, Switzerland. Total of $12 million. The transfers accelerated 3 weeks ago, right after the IPO filing went public. He's planning to run, I said. Not just planning, preparing. Daniel pulled out airline confirmations. Singapore Airlines. 3 one-way tickets. First class. Departing Thursday night, 2 days from now. David Carter, Sophie Carter, and Jennifer Wu. Who's Jennifer Wu? 29-year-old venture capital analyst. Also David's mistress. They met 9 months ago at a tech conference. The affair started shortly after. He showed me printed text messages. Cold and calculating. David. Tickets confirmed. New life starts Friday. Jennifer. What about Ashley? David. She's dead weight. Divorce from abroad. Cheaper that way. Jennifer. And the kid? David. Sophie has trust fund access at 18. Worth keeping her close. 12 years of inconvenience for access to millions. I stared at the messages. My son was planning to abandon his wife, take my granddaughter to a country with complicated extradition, and use her for her inheritance. An inheritance he'd stolen from her grandmother. Singapore has different laws, Daniel continued. Once he gets Sophie there, especially if he claims he's protecting her from an unstable grandfather, getting her back becomes exponentially harder. Unstable grandfather? Which brings me to the next part. Daniel pulled out another folder. David filed preliminary paperwork yesterday morning with family court. Petition for protective custody of Sophie Carter, citing concerns about grandfather's mental stability and inappropriate influence. He's building a legal case to cut you out of Sophie's life completely. The words hit like punches. David was going to take Sophie, steal her inheritance, and make sure I could never reach her. There's more, Daniel said grimly. School records. Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Anderson, has been keeping notes for 18 months. I obtained copies through legal channels. He spread them across the desk. Entry. From 14 months ago. Sophie exhibits anxiety when discussing her father. She describes feeling like she must be perfect or he'll be disappointed. Recommend family counseling. 6 months ago, Sophie arrived upset. Her father criticized her straight-A report card because she got an A- in art. She asked if there was extra credit to make him perfect. Concerning pattern. 3 months ago, Sophie flinched during fire drill. When asked about loud noises, she said, "Only when Daddy gets angry." Requested parent conference. Father declined. Grandfather attended. I couldn't read anymore. Sophie had been suffering for months, and I'd thought David was just being demanding. I'd called it high standards. This is abuse, Daniel said gently. Emotional abuse. Documented pattern. Multiple witnesses. Combined with the theft of Margaret's patent, the planned flight, the mistress, we have grounds for emergency custody intervention. Can we stop him from taking her Thursday? If we move fast. Rebecca is filing emergency petitions this afternoon, but we need more. We need proof that David knew about Margaret's patent rights and deliberately stole them. The safe deposit box, I said. Margaret's box, at Wells Fargo. Rebecca thinks there are original documents inside. 2 hours later, Rebecca, Daniel, and I stood in the vault at Wells Fargo. The manager had verified my authorization. Margaret had listed me as secondary accessor. Box 4739 was small but heavy. Inside were documents that made my hands shake. Original patent assignment from 2004, clearly stating 50% profit share for Sophie's benefit. Signed by Margaret, countersigned by David in 2006, witnessed and notarized. A second document, agreement amendment dated 2007, David's handwriting. All prior agreements void. Patent rights transfer fully to Technova Corp. With no profit-sharing obligations. Margaret's signature line was empty. She'd refused to sign. A third document, email printout from David to Margaret. September 2007. Mom, If you don't sign the amendment, I'll have to shut down the company. All your work will be worthless. Is that what you want? To destroy my future because you're being stubborn? Margaret's handwritten note in the margin. My son is trying to steal from his daughter. I will not let him erase Sophie's future for his greed. These documents stay here until someone protects her. Rebecca photographed everything. This is ironclad. David forged ahead without Margaret's consent. The original agreement is legally binding. Sophie is entitled to 50% of the IPO proceeds. That's $150 million he's trying to steal. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. David's name on the screen. Daniel gestured urgently. Answer it. I'm recording. Let him talk. I picked up. Hello, David. Dad, we need to talk about Saturday night. His voice was controlled, false concern. That scene you caused with the watch. Investors are asking questions. It made me look bad. You threw your mother's gift in the trash, I said steadily. That made you look bad. It's a cheap old watch. You're being sentimental and irrational. His tone shifted. Look, I'm worried about you. Living alone at your age, getting emotional, making scenes in public. Ashley and I have been discussing it. We think you might need help. Professional care. Maybe it's time to consider assisted living. There it was. The conservatorship threat. Daniel was writing notes rapidly. I don't need assisted living, David. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own life. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, your judgment is slipping. I have witnesses from Saturday who'll testify you weren't acting rationally. I have documentation. When the time comes, I'll do what's necessary to make sure you're properly cared for. Don't talk about what's necessary, I said, anger breaking through. Your mother worked herself to death building technology you claimed as your own. She protected Sophie's inheritance, and you're trying to steal it. Silence. Then his voice went ice cold. I don't know what you think you found in that watch, but you're confused. Mom helped with early research, sure. But Technova is mine. I built it. I own it. And if you try to spread lies about ownership, I'll have doctors evaluate your mental state. We both know what they'll find. An old man living in the past, unable to accept reality. I have Margaret's original patent, David, signed by both of you, with profit-sharing terms you agreed to and never honored. That's a lie. I have the emails where she asked you to put it in writing, where you promised to take care of Sophie, where you threatened to destroy the company if she didn't give you everything. His breathing changed. I could hear the panic. Whatever you think you have, it won't stand up in court. I have lawyers, the best money can buy. I'll tie you up in litigation for years. And while we're fighting, you won't see Sophie. I'm her father. I have rights. You're planning to take her to Singapore tomorrow night, I said. With your mistress, Jennifer Wu. Leave Ashley behind. Use Sophie to access her trust fund when she turns 18. Dead silence. Then a laugh. Cold and bitter. You hired investigators. Of course you did. Wasting money on paranoid delusions. It's not paranoid if it's true. Listen carefully, old man. David's voice dropped to something dangerous. I'm taking my daughter on a business trip. That's my right as her parent. What you call stealing, I call building a legacy. Mom's so-called patent was rough research. I turned it into a billion-dollar company. That makes it mine. Sophie is mine. And if you try to interfere, I will have you declared mentally incompetent, put in a care facility, and stripped of any rights. You'll spend your final years in a nursing home, forgotten. Is that what you want? I want my granddaughter safe from a thief and a liar. Then you're going to be very disappointed. The line went dead. Daniel reached across and gently took my phone. We got everything. The threats, the admission he's taking Sophie abroad, dismissing Margaret's contribution, combined with the patent documents and flight records. This is strong evidence. Thursday morning, Rebecca filed emergency petitions with family court. Petition for temporary guardianship of Sophie Carter, based on evidence of parental unfitness and planned parental kidnapping. Injunction preventing David Carter from taking Sophie Carter out of California pending custody hearing. Fraud lawsuit seeking damages for stolen intellectual property on behalf of Sophie's estate. Judge Patricia Wu reviewed the evidence at 2 p.m. By 3 p.m., her clerk called. Emergency hearing scheduled for 4 p.m. today. All parties ordered to appear. At 3:45 p.m., David walked into the courtroom with two lawyers who looked like they charged $1,000 an hour. He saw me sitting with Rebecca, and his face went pale, then red with rage. Ashley sat behind him, confused and scared. Sophie was with Child Protective Services, as the judge had ordered when Rebecca presented evidence of the planned flight. Judge Wu entered. This is an emergency hearing regarding Sophie Carter, age 9. Mr. Carter, you were planning to take your daughter out of the country tonight. David's lead lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client is planning a business trip to Singapore. Taking his daughter is within his parental rights. With a woman who is not his wife, on one-way tickets, after moving $12 million offshore? Judge Wu's voice was steel. That's not a business trip, counselor. That's parental kidnapping. She turned to Rebecca. Miss Chen, you represent the child's grandfather? Yes, Your Honor. We're seeking emergency temporary custody based on evidence of fraud, emotional abuse, and planned flight risk. Present your evidence. For the next hour, Rebecca systematically destroyed David's life. She presented Margaret's original patent, David's signed agreement to profit sharing, the emails where he pressured his dying mother, the forged amendment he tried to use, the offshore bank accounts, the affair, the flight tickets, the teacher's notes about Sophie's anxiety, the text messages planning to use Sophie for her trust fund. David's lawyers tried to object, to deflect, to claim the documents were taken out of context. But Judge Wu had seen enough. Mr. Carter, did you or did you not sign this agreement in 2006, promising your mother 50% of profits for your daughter's benefit? David's jaw was tight. I signed something. Yes, but business circumstances changed. Did you honor that agreement when you filed for IPO? The company structure evolved. Yes or no, Mr. Carter? No. But I intended to. You intended to steal $150 million from your own daughter while erasing your mother's contribution to your success. Judge Wu's voice could have cut glass. You forged documents, manipulated your dying mother, planned to flee the country, and gaslight your father about his mental stability. Is there anything you'd like to say to explain this behavior? David stood silent. Then his mask cracked. I built that company from nothing. Mom helped early on, sure, but I made it successful. I worked 100-hour weeks. I sacrificed everything. That money is mine. I earned it. You earned it using your mother's stolen patent, Judge Wu said. Everything else is just justification for theft. She reviewed documents for another moment, then looked up. Emergency temporary custody is awarded to William Carter, pending full hearing. Sophie Carter is to be placed with her grandfather, effective immediately. David Carter is prohibited from leaving California, from contact with Sophie except supervised visitation, and from any financial transactions regarding Technova stock pending fraud investigation. The SEC will be notified regarding irregularities in the IPO filing. The gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca was already coordinating with Child Protective Services. They're bringing Sophie to your apartment in an hour. You'll have conditions. Weekly check-ins, supervised visits with David, formal custody hearing in 2 weeks. Can he still take the company public? Not without disclosing the patent dispute. When investors find out the core technology is subject to a 50% claim, the IPO will collapse. David's about to lose everything. An hour later, Sophie walked through my apartment door carrying a small backpack. She looked around slowly, as if memorizing every detail. Is this home now, Grandpa? For as long as you need it to be, sweetheart. She walked straight to the pocket watch, sitting on the kitchen table where I'd left it. I opened it carefully, showing her the hidden compartment, now empty of its secrets. Grandma hid something inside, I explained. Something that proves she loved you more than anything. She protected your future even when she knew she wouldn't be here to see it. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Daddy said she just helped a little, that he did everything. Your grandmother invented the technology that made your father's company possible. She was brilliant, kind, and she made sure you'd be taken care of. Your daddy forgot that, but we're going to make sure everyone remembers. I'm glad you saved the watch, Grandpa. I'm glad you didn't give up. I will never give up on you, Sophie. That's a promise. She hugged me tight. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd done something Margaret would be proud of. The watch sat on the table, its secret revealed, its purpose fulfilled. My wife had known this day might come. She'd built her protection carefully, hiding truth in plain sight, waiting for someone to care enough to look. I'd looked. I'd found what she'd left. And now, Sophie was safe. The war wasn't over. David would fight. Lawyers would argue. Courts would deliberate. But tonight, my granddaughter was home. The watch that David threw away had destroyed his empire and saved Sophie's future. Margaret's final gift had been revenge served cold, patient, and absolutely devastating. And that was exactly what she'd intended. If you're still watching at this point, please comment the number 1 below so I know you're still with me on this journey. What Lies Ahead contains important truths about protecting those we love from those who should love them most. 2 weeks later, in family court, David's lawyers presented their case, but the evidence was overwhelming. Margaret's patent, David's theft, the planned flight, the abuse. Judge Wu's final ruling was unequivocal. Full custody to William Carter. David's parental rights suspended pending criminal investigation. Sophie's inheritance secured. David stood in that courtroom, his empire crumbling, his future destroyed, all because he threw away a watch he thought was worthless. Margaret had been right. The truth was hidden in plain sight. And when the time came, it had saved the one person who mattered most. Our granddaughter. Our legacy. Our love made real.